Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a world without engines, electricity, or even glass that keeps the cold out. You wake before the first streaks of dawn, in a room that smells faintly of smoke, wool, and yesterday's stew. Somewhere outside, a rooster argues with the darkness, and the rafters creak like old bones settling into another day. You roll off your straw-stuffed mattress, brushing away a feather or two. And the chill bites before your feet even find the dirt floor. Welcome to morning in the Middle Ages, no alarms, no coffee, just survival. You probably won't survive this, by the way, not with those soft, modern hands. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I love knowing how far these sleepy travels reach. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stretch, and the first thing you hear is the house waking with you. It's more of a hut, really wattle and daub walls patched by years of hope and mud. The roof sags a little under the weight of thatch, and if you're lucky, it doesn't leak too badly. The air smells of last night's fire, a faint sharpness of ash mixed with damp earth. You're still wrapped in a coarse linen shift that's seen better days, and your blanketa, faded woolen thing, feels more decorative than warm. Outside, the light leaks through the cracks in the shutters. Silver and weak, as though the sun hasn't quite decided to show up for work yet. Your body moves on instinct, not enthusiasm. You know what's waiting. Water that must be fetched. Animals that must be fed. A fire that must be coaxed from yesterday's embers. The medieval morning is less about routine and more about obligation. You pull on rough hose and a tunic that smells faintly of smoke and sheep. The laces tug, your fingers clumsy in the cold. There's no mirror your reflection, lives only in puddles or the still surface of the water trough. And honestly, that's probably for the best. You're not dressing for fashion. You're dressing for survival. The medieval world doesn't care if you're stylish, only that you're warm enough not to freeze and covered enough not to offend the parish priest. As you open the door, the outside rushes in damp air, the sweet smell of grass and the distant bleating of sheep. Smoke curls lazily from your neighbor's roof. Somewhere down the path, a dog barks at nothing. You trudge toward the well with a wooden bucket in hand, the handle worn smooth by generations who did the same thing, day after day. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were truly miserable or simply adapted to the grind. But either way, this is your normal. The bucket hits the water with a satisfying splash, and for a moment, there's peace, the surface trembling with sunlight, your breath ghosting in the morning chill. You haul it up, the weight cutting into your hands, and start the slow walk back home. Your muscles ache, but it's a familiar kind of ache, one that doesn't complain because there's no point. You can't opt out of living. Back home, the hearth is nothing but gray dust and a few glowing coals. You crouch down, poke at the embers, and whisper encouragement like you're waking a stubborn friend. A handful of straw, a few twigs, and a long breath later, the flame flickers back to life. Warmth spreads slowly, painting orange over your fingers. You're the household's first engine of the day, the one who gets everything moving before anyone else even stirs. If you're part of a peasant family, space is shared. The children are still curled up like little bundles near the fire pit, wrapped in old cloths. Maybe there's an old grandmother muttering her morning prayers, her rosary beads clacking softly. The air is full of tiny sounds, the crackle of the rekindled fire, the creak of the door, the distant lowing of a cow that's ready to be milked. Life doesn't rush here, but it never stops. You glance at the small tabula, few wooden bowls, maybe a hunk of coarse bread left from yesterday. Breakfast isn't a meal so much as a formality. You nibble, not feast. Bread dipped in ale or broth, perhaps a bit of onion if luck's been kind. The idea of bacon or eggs every morning would make most medieval villagers laugh until Their teeth, they still had them rattled. The first hours of the day are always physical. You step into your boots, tug your cloak tighter, and head out into the gray light. The animals stir, chickens cluck accusingly. The pig snorts from its pen, and the cow shifts impatiently. You know their rhythms better than your own heartbeat. They depend on you, and you depend on them. It's a strange, quiet pact between creatures just trying to survive. You grab a wooden stool and sit beside the cow, pressing your head against its flank as your hands work rhythmically. The milk hits the bucket with a soft, steady sound. Steam rises from the warm liquid into the cold air, and for a second, it's oddly beautiful. Not romantic, not poetic, just real. The kind of beauty that only appears when no one's watching. Somewhere in the distance, church bells toll. It's not just a call to prayer. It's a medieval clock. People don't measure time in minutes, but in sound the bell for dawn, for work, for rest. You pause a moment, whisper a short prayer you've said 1,000 times. Half out of faith, half out of habit. Historians still argue whether religion in the Middle Ages was heartfelt devotion or cultural expectation. But to you, it's eerie. Breathe it without thinking. The day brightens as the sun finally commits to rising. You look toward the fields, damp with dew and already humming with activity. Neighbors wave as they pass, bundled in rough wool, faces weathered and patient. Conversation is simple, functional. You talk about the weather, the crops, the rumor that a traveler saw a comet last night. That last one gets a few worried looks. Comets aren't good news here. Everything means something. Sins, omens, dreams. You hear laughter from the far end of the lena. Few children chasing a goose, shrieking with delight as feathers fly. The sound mixes with the smell of smoke and fresh-cut wood. This world is harsh, yes, but not joyless. People find light in the smallest corners. Back at your home, you glance at the hearth again. The fire's burning steady now, and you hang the pot of pottage over it. It's a stew that never really ends. You just keep adding to it yesterday's beans, a few turnips, maybe some barley. The smell is earthy, comforting, a medieval version of leftovers. You stir it with a wooden spoon, tasting the result and adding a pinch of salt if you have any left. Salt's expensive, almost a treasure, so every grain feels like a luxury. A cat slinks in through the open doorway, tail high, eyes sharp. Cats in medieval villages aren't pets, not really. They're pest control with attitude. You toss it a crumb, and it stares at you with disdain before stalking off. Typical, by now, the household is fully awake. Voices blend with the soft hum of the village. You help a child tie their belt, sweep the floor, and check the roof for leaks. The world you live in doesn't allow stillness for long. Even rest feels like preparation for more work. As the morning turns to mid-morning, you catch a glimpse of yourself reflected in a metal bowl, blurred, imperfect, but enough to see the dirt smudged across your cheek. You laugh softly. Vanity doesn't survive long out here. Survival trims away everything unnecessary, including pride. Still, there's a quiet dignity in it, the rhythm of the chores, the steadiness of habit. Every movement has purpose, even the small ones. There's comfort in that kind of predictability. Once, when you were younger, you might have dreamed of something beyond this village of knights, castles, or adventure. But now, you know the real adventure is just making it through the day without losing your firewood, your patience, or your last loaf of bread. You pause at the doorway again, watching the sun crawl higher, and for a fleeting second, you feel a kind of peace. The world is brutal, yes, but it's also constant. It asks for everything and gives just enough in return to keep you going. Tomorrow will look exactly the same, and somehow, that's the comfort of it. The morning slides into full light, and already your body moves like it remembers every motion before you even think. The chores come one after another, stitched into your day like thread through rough linen. You feed the chickens, scatter grain across the dirt, and they rush forward in a flurry of feathers that tickle your ankles. One of them gives you the kind of look that suggests she still remembers yesterday's late feeding. You mumble an apology to a bird because in this world, you talk to animals more than people before noon. The air is alive now, thick with sound. Hooves clop on the muddy path as your neighbor's oxen pull a creaking cart toward the field. Somewhere, someone is hammering a new handle onto a hoe. Smoke rises from every chimney, a gray lace drifting across the rooftops. There's no privacy here. Every movement, every sound is part of a shared rhythm that holds the village together. When no one's watching, you're still seen. Not by cameras or mirrors, but by the quiet, collective gaze of a place too small to keep secrets. You grab a bundle of kindling from the corner and bring it inside. The pot on the fire has started to bubble again. You stir it absent-mindedly, the thick mixture of barley and root vegetables clinging to your spoon. Food isn't about flavor here. It's about not fainting by mid-afternoon. Still, when the smell fills your small house, there's a strange comfort. It's the scent of survival, simple, stubborn, familiar. Your fingers ache, cracked from cold water and rough work. You rub them against your apron and glance around. The room looks the same as yesterday, and the day before that, wooden table. 3 stools, a shelf holding a few earthenware bowls, a single iron knife. Everything you own could fit in a modern backpack, yet somehow it feels heavy with meaning. You step outside again and see your neighbor, Hilda, wrestling with a stubborn goat. She's older, strong as a cartwheel, and her laughter rolls down the lane like thunder. She waves a hand, shouts something about the Lord's tax collector coming next week. You've grown automatically. The taxman never brings good news, just tallies, threats, and that familiar hollow feeling when you hand over grain you can't spare. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were crushed entirely by taxes or managed to outwit the system through small acts of rebellion. Either way, you've got your own method, keeping a few eggs hidden, trading in whispers rather than coins. The local reeve might suspect, but he's got his own stash tucked under the floorboards. Everyone's guilty, so no one points fingers too loudly. You head toward the stream, bucket in hand, because washing is next. It's not bathing, not really. More like splashing away the dirt before it fully becomes part of you. You kneel by the bank, dip your hands in, and hiss at the cold. The water glitters with sunlight and tiny flecks of silt. You scrub your face, feeling both refreshed and slightly raw. Clean is relative here. It just means less dirt than an hour ago. Nearby, a group of children chase each other, their laughter cutting through the stillness. Their tunics are patched, hair tangled, but their joy is unfiltered. You can't help smiling. You remember being that age when work was still half play and the world felt enormous. Before you learned that even joy has to clock in and earn its keep. The chores continue like chapters in a book you can't stop rereading. You repair a torn hem, patch a hole in the thatch, check on the drying herbs hanging from the rafters. Those herbs, sage, yarrow, maybe a bit of wormwood aren't, just for cooking. They're your tiny apothecary. A fever, yarrow tea, stomachache, mint if you can find it. Of course, if things get serious, you'd call the village wise woman. Everyone pretends not to believe in her charms, but they still slip her bread or candles when their children cough too long. You take a break on the bench outside your door, stretching your back. A soft breeze rolls over the fields, carrying the smell of damp soil and distant sheep. Somewhere far off, you hear the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer. It's a sound that marks the heart of the village, the pulse of work. You imagine him there, sleeves rolled up, sparks flying as he shapes iron into nails, horseshoes, and tools. Every clang is a heartbeat of civilization. Without him, everything would fall apart. You think about your own work, humble, repetitive, but necessary. You might not forge iron, but you forge order. Each swept floor, each mended garment, each careful storing of grain keeps chaos at bay. It's not glamorous, but it's sacred in its own way. As the sun climbs higher, the world warms. You can almost feel your muscles loosen, though your stomach rumbles like a small, angry animal. It's time for a short meal, maybe a crust of bread dipped in ale or thin broth. You take it slow, savoring what little flavor there is. Bread's dark and dense, made from rye or barley. White flour is a luxury for nobles you've only ever seen it once. At a festival, when the Lord's wife distributed small loaves as charity. You remember the taste still soft, strange, unreal. You sit cross-legged by the doorway and tear off a piece of bread. A sparrow hops close. Bold little thing. You toss it a crumb. For a second, you both share the same thought. It's not much, but it's enough. After the meal, it's back to work. You join others in the field, hoe in hand, rhythm steady. The earth resists, but you know its moods. You dig, turn, plant. The smell of soil is thick, and your clothes cling with sweat. The sun beats down, relentless, and you feel it prickling on the back of your neck. There's no sunscreen, no shade, but your own shadow. You think of the people in the future complaining about traffic, and you almost laugh. This is your traffic jam, rocks, roots, and time itself. Your thoughts wander as you work. You recall the stories told last night by the fire, the one about the monk who swore he saw angels dancing in the forest, and another about a thief who stole from the Lord's granary and vanished without a trace. Everyone suspects he fled to the woods and joined the bandits. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. In the Middle Ages, truth travels slower than gossip. The day hums on. You pause to drink from a clay jug, water warm from the sun. A dragonfly skims the surface of the puddle nearby, its wings flashing like stained glass. You take a breath and, for a moment, forget how tired you are. This is your world, imperfect, exhausting, but alive. You head back toward the village as bells ring again, marking noon. Time to rest, if just for a little. Inside, the air feels cooler. You stretch out near the hearth, lying on your back, eyes tracing the smoke stains on the ceiling. Your body buzzes with fatigue, but your mind drifts. You think about people in far-off towns, the merchants, the monks, the nobles who dine from silver plates. You wonder if they ever feel this kind of stillness, the kind that's earned, not granted. Sometimes, when no one's around, you hum softly. Old songs, half remembered, passed down through generations. Your grandmother used to sing while carding wool, her voice rough but comforting. Now, it's your turn to keep the melody alive. Music doesn't belong to bards or courts, belongs to hands at work, two voices that echo in empty rooms. A knock at the door jolts you. It's your younger brother, grinning, holding out a small wooden bowl. Inside, miracle of miracles, is honey. The beekeeper down the road had a good harvest, and a little sweetness has trickled your way. You dip your finger, taste it. The flavor floods your senses, warm, floral, golden. It's not just food. It's proof that even in hard lives, sweetness still finds its way in. You save the rest, carefully covering the bowl. Honey keeps for years, but you'll share it tonight. Everything tastes better when the day's work is behind you. As afternoon stretches toward evening, you feel the weariness creep in again. Your shoulders ache, your hands sting, your hair sticks to your face. But there's satisfaction in it. You've done what you had to. No one saw the small victories, the perfectly patched cloak, the revived fire, the bucket that didn't leak, but they matter. They keep the invisible world turning. By the time the sun dips lower, the air cools. The village quiets except for the faint rustle of trees and the far-off laughter of children chasing fireflies. You stand at your doorway, watching shadows lengthen. The smell of supper wafts from nearby homes, garlic, cabbage, smoke. It's not much, but it's the smell of life continuing. You think, not for the first time, that the medieval day is an unending loop: chores, hunger, chores again. But within it hides something softer, something human, the pride of doing what needs to be done when no one's clapping. Maybe that's what survival really is, kind of invisible courage. And tomorrow, when the rooster shouts again. You'll rise, stretch, and start all over, because that's what you do when no one's watching. By the time the shadows of the afternoon stretch long and soft across the fields, you start to think about food again, not because you're greedy, but because your stomach never lets you forget it for long. Hunger in the Middle Ages isn't an occasional inconvenience. It's the background music of your life. You've learned to live with it, to measure every crumb, to dream about feasts that rarely happen. Tonight, though, you'll make something from almost nothing, as you always do. You begin with the basics: a small sack of barley, a couple of onions, and a few limp vegetables that have seen better days. If you're lucky, there's a scrap of salted pork left from last week. You hold it up to the light. It's hard as stone and smells faintly of smoke. Perfect. It'll soften in the pot, and that's all you can ask for. You toss it into the pottage, the eternal stew that lives on your fire day and night, absorbing every flavor like a living thing. The hearth crackles gently. You stir with your wooden spoon, listening to the soft bubbling, the sound as comforting as rain. Steam curls up, bringing with it the scent of onions, earth, and smoke. It's not exactly appetizing to modern standards, but to you, it smells like hope. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were perpetually malnourished or surprisingly well-fed thanks to homegrown produce and communal sharing. The truth, as usual, lies somewhere in between. Some seasons you eat like a minor king fresh peas, wild herbs, even a rabbit caught in the woods. Other times, famine crouches just beyond the horizon, and you survive on whatever your hands can find. Tonight, though, the stew tastes decent. You dip a hunk of bread into its course, brown and full of grit from the millstones that ground it. You chew slowly, feeling the rough texture against your teeth. It fills you, if not entirely pleases you. Food is fuel first, joy second. Still, there are days when joy sneaks in. You remember the fair last month, the smells, the noise, the miracle of roasted meat turning on spits, dripping fat into the fire. You had one bite that day, just one. But you remember it as vividly as any modern feast. The way the grease ran down your fingers, the salt, the charred flavor. You licked your hands clean and thought, for a brief moment, that life wasn't half bad. You smile faintly at the memory as you finish stirring the pot. Behind you, a child's voice pipes up to your neighbor's boy, maybe 6 years old, poking his head through your open door. "Is it ready yet?" he asks, eyes wide with expectation. You grin, wave him closer, and hand him a small bowl. He slurps noisily, grinning between each mouthful. For all its simplicity, your stew still brings comfort. As the last light of day fades, you set the pot aside, letting it simmer gently. Then you pull out the real treasure, small wheel of cheese, slightly cracked, a gift from a cousin who lives near the abbey. You cut it carefully, the knife squeaking against the rind, and share slices with whoever happens to wander in. In a world where scarcity rules, sharing is the truest form of wealth. Sometimes you get lucky with ingredients: wild garlic from the forest, a handful of mushrooms that may or may not be safe. You hope for the best. Maybe even a splash of ale to enrich the broth. Ale is everywhere. It's safer than water, mildly alcoholic, and made at home more often than not. You drink it at breakfast, lunch, and supper, because in this age, hydration comes with bubbles. Speaking of drink, you sometimes hear about wine, that mysterious beverage of the nobility. You've tasted it only once, watered down and sour, during a wedding feast when the priest blessed the cup before passing it around. It burned a little going down, and you weren't sure if it was holy or just poorly stored. Either way, you felt slightly lighter afterward, so maybe that's the point. You take another sip of ale now, letting the bitterness roll across your tongue. The firelight flickers across your face, and you imagine what it would be like to sit in a noble hall. At one of those long tables covered in trenchers of white bread, platters of roasted swan, and bowls of sweet custard. You picture the minstrels playing softly, the lords boasting, the ladies whispering behind jeweled veils. It sounds magnificent till you remember the smell. People in castles might eat better, but they don't smell any better. There's comfort in that equality. Your own table is quieter, but not silent. A few neighbors drop by, bowls in hand, trading gossip as they scoop from your pot. Someone mentions that a merchant passed through the next village selling strange spices, pepper, cinnamon, even saffron. You shake your head, laughing. What would I do with saffron? Paint my bread gold. The laughter feels good, echoing against the low ceiling. There's a warmth here that has nothing to do with the fire. It's the warmth of community, of knowing you're not alone in the endless grind of survival. Then someone mentions a new bread lotha Lord has decreed that only his mill can grind grain. And every family must pay for the privilege. You groan in unison. Bread, the most basic of needs, now costs more. You can already imagine the complaints at the next church gathering. Still, you'll pay, because you have to. When the bowls are empty, the group lingers, talking about the coming winter. You exchange seeds, advice, and rumors about which neighbor might have a secret stash of smoked meat. One man swears he saw lights dancing over the hills last night, spirits, he says. Or maybe just farmers with torches. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed in every superstition or simply enjoyed pretending. But in your world, belief and entertainment often share the same face. As the fire dies down, you stack the bowls, scraping the last bits of stew into the ashes for the cat. She appears instantly, like a small ghost, and begins to eat. You watch her, and for a second, envy her simplicity. Sleep, hunt, eat, repeat. No taxes, no blisters, no politics. You stretch your legs, stare into the embers. The orange glow dances on your skin, and the room smells of ash and comfort. The stew pot sits by the hearth, ready to be revived tomorrow. That's how food works. Here it never truly ends. It just changes shape. You remember your grandmother telling you that each family's pottage carries its history. Every meal remembers the last one, she said, and feeds the next. You didn't understand it then, but now, as you taste the faint echo of last week's onions and this morning's barley, it makes perfect sense. Your thoughts drift to the monasteries, those strange, distant places where monks eat in silence and record everything they grow. Sometimes you wish you could see their kitchens, where they brew beers stronger than anything you've ever tasted and bake bread so soft it could be mistaken for clouds. Of course, monks live a different kind of hunger, one for God instead of food. Still, you suspect a few of them sneak an extra bowl or two after prayers. You can almost hear your stomach sighing in agreement as you scrape the pot clean. The night grows quiet now, the village wrapped in darkness. Only a few candles flicker in nearby windows. You sit with your back against the wall, cup in hand, watching shadows dance. This is the part of the day that feels closest to peace. Tomorrow's meals will be the same. You'll eat bread, stew, maybe a bit of dried fish if the trader comes through. You'll drink ale, chew slowly, and remind yourself that being full, even briefly, is a blessing. The people who come after you, the ones with grocery stores and microwaves, will never understand how holy a simple bowl of hot food can feel. And yet, sometimes, you do dream of taste. You imagine sugar, bright and crystalline, something you've only heard of. Or chocolate some travelers whisper of, dark beans from faraway lands that can be turned into drink. You don't know if it's true, but the idea feels magical. The future sounds delicious, even if you'll never taste it. You glance toward the fire one last time, sigh, and pull your cloak tighter. The night outside hums with crickets, and your belly, for once, is quiet. You know tomorrow will bring hunger again, but for now, you rest easy. Somewhere, far off, the abbey bells toll for evening prayers. Their sound floats through the cool air, soft and haunting. You whisper a thank you under your breath, not to any saint in particular, but to the stew, the bread, the fire, and to the small, stubborn miracle of getting through another day. Night has settled across the village, and the flicker of torchlight spills from windows like spilled honey. The day's work has ended. The tools are resting. Cana comes the part. No one writes about the quiet, unguarded hours when people become fully human again. Behind each thin wall of wattle and daub, there are murmurs, laughter, sighs, the creak of wooden beds, and sometimes just silence. This is where love, marriage, and secrets live woven through daily life like stray threads you can never quite pull loose. You sit by the dying fire, hands warm, body aching. Across from you sits the person you've shared everything with: bread, chores, sweat, and exhaustion. Marriage here isn't about romance the way songs pretend. It's a partnership forged in necessity, sealed by the church, and maintained by habit, affection, and survival. But still, when the chores are done and the fire burns low, there's room for tenderness. Maybe a hand brushing yours as you mend a tunic. Maybe a quiet joke whispered so the children don't hear. You glance at your spouse, who's darning socks by candlelight. The shadows dance on their face, softening the lines carved by years of labor. There's something steady in that sight, something that makes the harshness of life bearable. You can't afford grand gestures, but a shared glance can hold more than a sonnet. Outside, a dog barks, breaking the stillness. You listen for footsteps. Sometimes the reeve patrols late, making sure no one's poaching wood or brewing ale without permission. But tonight, it's just the wind through the hedges. You breathe out slowly, relieved. Privacy is rare here. Even your walls seem to have ears. Still, when the fire's low and the children are asleep, the house becomes a tiny island, cut off from the world. Love in the Middle Ages isn't all hearts and songs. It's practical, often arranged and bound by duty. Most marriages start as alliances between families. You remember your wedding, the church bells ringing, the priest droning Latin you barely understood, the smell of flowers and sweat in the crowded nave. You were nervous, but not unhappy. That's the strange thing. People didn't expect fireworks, only partnership. Historians still argue whether medieval marriages were loveless or simply shaped by different expectations. But sitting here now, you'd say it's neither. Love just looks different when it grows in the cracks between hunger and hard work. You don't need poetry to feel it, just need someone who'll share their bread when the flour runs out. You think about how relationships are formed in your village. The tavern, the marketplace, the harvest festival, these are your dating apps. You might meet someone while trading eggs or dancing barefoot in the mud during midsummer. The glances, the gossip, the subtle smiles across a crowded square, they're your version of romance. And when people finally marry, the whole village knows before the couple even does. You remember when old Marta, the midwife, teased you about your first crush. You'd gone red as a beet, stammering your denials, while she laughed and said, "I blush while you can." Once you're wed, it's just work, snoring, and children. She wasn't wrong, but she wasn't entirely right either. The candle sputters. You lean closer, feeling the warmth fade. Around you, the small room feels smaller, intimate. The smell of smoke, wool, and sweat blends with the faint sweetness of herbs hanging from the rafters. There's a sense of safety here, of routine. You can hear your spouse humming softly, a tune that's been passed down generations. It's not about love so much as endurance, the way two people learn to live inside the same rhythm. Outside, another sound rises, a low murmur, like laughter carried on the wind. You know it's from the tavern. Evenings there are noisy, full of ale and gossip. Someone's probably telling the story of the miller's daughter again, the one who supposedly met a knight in the woods and came back blessed with a baby and a new cloak. The story changes with every retelling, but it's always popular. People crave a bit of scandal. It keeps the long nights interesting. You smile faintly. Secrets here travel faster than birds. A whispered rumor in the morning becomes gospel by evening. Everyone knows everything, or thinks they do. It's part of village life. Sometimes that gossip can ruin a person as quickly as disease. You remember poor Ulrich, the cooper's apprentice. One careless flirtation with the Lord's maid, and suddenly he was branded a sinner, shunned by the church, forced to leave. No one ever saw him again. Maybe he joined a monastery, maybe a band of outlaws. Maybe he's bones under some forgotten oak. That's the danger of being noticed too much. So people learn to keep their hearts quiet. But even silence can't hide everything. You know couples who steal moments behind barns, who exchange carved trinkets like secret vows. Love, even forbidden love, finds a way to exist in the cracks of rules. It's human nature. You see it in the way the baker's wife blushes when the blacksmith passes, or how the reeve's son looks at the shepherd girl as if she's carved from light. You pretend not to notice, but you do. Everyone does. Historians still argue whether people in your time married for love or simply for survival, but you've seen both. You've seen couples who barely speak but stay together because that's what the world demands. And you've seen others who look at each other like the sun itself rose just for them. Maybe love isn't bound by eras, just translated into whatever the times will allow. You think of courtly love, the kind sung by troubadours and whispered in noble courts. The idea that knights pine for unattainable ladies, sending poems and sighs across forbidden boundaries. It sounds absurdly romantic, but you can't help being curious. What would it be like to love that freely, that dramatically? Then you glance at your cracked hands and the soot under your nails and laugh quietly. You'll settle for warmth, not poetry. Still, there are nights when something softer stirs in you. Maybe it's when your spouse falls asleep beside you, hands still resting lightly on yours. Or when your child mumbles in their sleep, dreaming of a feast. Or when you step outside and see the moon lighting the village, silver and serene. For a moment, everything feels connected: the fields, the sky, the beating of your heart. It's love, just in a quieter form. You stretch, feeling the ache in your back. You've been sitting too long. You stand and move to the door, peeking out. The street is empty now, save for a drunk stumbling home and the soft glow of the church lantern. The priest always keeps it burning, a small reminder that God never sleeps. You smile faintly because you know people still do things in the dark that no priest would approve of. A figure moves in the shadows, two, actually. You squint, they're holding hands, whispering, probably not married. You turn away, pretending you didn't see. Everyone deserves their moment, even in a world that forbids so much. Back inside, the fire's embers have dimmed to a faint red. You sit again, resting your head on your arms. Your spouse joins you, leans against your shoulder, and for a while, neither of you speaks. Words aren't needed. There's comfort in the silence, in simply existing together after a long day. The night deepens. You can hear your own breathing, the faint crackle of the fire, and the faraway howl of a wolf in the forest. Somewhere, a baby cries. Somewhere else, laughter breaks through a closed door. Life continues behind every wall, full of small dramas, heartbreaks, reconciliations, all unseen, all real. You think of the church sermons about purity, chastity, sin. The priest means well. But you suspect he's never milked a cow or buried a child or watched his wife nearly die in childbirth. Life is too messy to fit cleanly into doctrine. People do what they must, love who they can, and hope for mercy later. The candle burns low, its flame flickering. You reach out, pinch the wick, and the world goes dark except for the glow of embers. You lie down on your straw mattress beside the person who shares your burdens. The thatch above you rustles faintly as mice scurry, and outside, the moonlight spills through cracks in the roof. You close your eyes, listening to the rhythm of another breath beside yours. Maybe this isn't the love the poets sing about, but it's real. It's tired, loyal, sometimes clumsy, but it's yours. And as you drift toward sleep, you think, for a life without privacy, this small. Shared peace might be the greatest secret of all. Morning arrives quietly, as it always does. No alarm clocks, no schedules. Just the gradual light seeping through the cracks in the shutters and the first sounds of life returning to the village. You wake to the smell of smoke and the faint clatter of pots. Someone outside is already drawing water. Someone else is cursing because the fire went out overnight. You roll over, stretch, and listen to the symphony of survival begin again. You don't get weekends off here. Every day has its rhythm, its own steady choreography of work and waiting. The rooster doesn't care if you danced too long at last night's festival, or if your back still aches from yesterday's labor. It crows, and you move. You start the day by checking the hearth, coaxing the embers back to life with a few dry twigs. Fire isn't just warmth, it's life itself. Without it, you can't cook, you can't see, you can't even sterilize water. People guard their coals like treasure. In fact, one of your neighbors, poor Etta, once lost her fire during a storm and had to beg around the village for a few glowing embers to relight hers. You remember her trudging door to door with an iron pan, smoke rising from it like a fragile promise. Historians still argue whether fire was ever truly kept burning all year round. But you know from experience that letting it die in winter feels like losing a heartbeat. So you tend yours carefully. Once the fire's strong enough, you reach for the bread you baked yesterday, a coarse, dark loaf that tastes faintly of earth and smoke. You break it in half, saving the smaller piece for later, and chew slowly. No butter, no jam, just sustenance. Bread is sacred here, even if it's humble. It represents not just food, but effort, sowing, harvesting, grinding, kneading, baking. Each step takes a piece of you. You glance out the door. The village is stirring. Women carry baskets to the well, men haul tools toward the fields, and children chase chickens with the unbothered joy of the young. The air smells of dew and manure and wood smoke, your daily perfume. You step outside and feel the cold kiss of morning air on your face. There's always something to do. Mend the fence, milk the goat, check the traps. The work never ends, but you've learned to find rhythm in it. It's almost meditative, your own version of mindfulness, centuries before anyone would call it that. As you walk toward the fields, you notice a figure ahead. Father Benedict, the parish priest, his robe dragging in the mud. He's visiting houses again, reminding people about confession or collecting tithes. You nod politely as he passes, and he blesses you, though his eyes linger a moment too long on your basket of eggs. You smile faintly. The church always finds a way to be hungry. Life in the village isn't just about labors, about maintaining balance. You owe the Lord rent, the priest's prayers, the community your participation. Miss one of those, and gossip will start before the sun sets. But still, you manage small rebellions, watering down ale to make it last longer, sneaking a few turnips from the communal field, or brewing herbal medicine even though the priest frowns on witchcraft. Speaking of herbs, you pass by old Marta's hut again. She's bent over her cauldron, muttering as steam curls from its rim. People come to her for cures, charms, and sometimes love potions. She knows every plant in the woods, every root that can soothe or sicken. Officially, she's tolerated, but only because everyone secretly needs her. You once saw her heal a festering wound with nothing but honey, garlic, and a whispered prayer. The church might call it superstition, but you call it survival. Up early again, she croaks, not looking up. Always, you reply. She chuckles. Good. The lazy ones starve first. You can't tell if she's joking. Probably not. The rest of the day unfolds in a steady rhythm. You join the others in the fields, the air thick with the smell of damp soil. The land looks endless under the pale sky, and yet every inch of it belongs to someone above you, the Lord, the monastery, or the church. You're just the caretaker. You till, you sow, you harvest, and in return, you get to live. You pause for a moment to straighten your back. Around you, Other peasants work silently, each lost in their own thoughts. You wonder if they're thinking what you are, that life feels like walking in circles. The same fields, the same tools, the same aches, day after day. But then a small thing happens, skylark sings overhead. Or a cloud drifts like silk across the sun and suddenly, the weight lifts a little. It's strange how the smallest beauty can survive in a life so harsh. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were miserable or content, but you'd say it's both. Misery and peace live side by side here, taking turns like seasons. By midday, the work pauses for a brief meal. You sit in the shade with a few others, passing around bread, cheese, and ale that tastes slightly sour. Someone cracks a joke about the reeve's bald head, and laughter spreads like wildfire. For a few minutes, the world feels lighter. Then the bell rings from the manor tower, a deep, heavy sound that rolls across the fields. Everyone falls quiet. It means the Lord's messenger has arrived, and that always stirs anxiety. Taxes, a new decree, a call to arms. You wait, heart thudding as a rider appears at the far end of the road, dust rising behind him. He dismounts, unfurls a parchment, and begins to read. It's a message from the king's men. New tolls on grain, new duties on livestock. You can practically feel the collective groan ripple through the crowd. More coins you don't have, more debts you can't escape. You look at the ground, clenching your jaw. Later, as you walk home, your friend Tomas mutters, "They'll squeeze us till our bones creak." You nod, but keep quiet. Complaining changes nothing, and it's dangerous. Words can travel faster than you expect. Better to keep your head down and your hands busy. Back home, you find your spouse mending clothes by the fire again. You tell them about the new taxes, and they sigh, but don't look surprised. "We'll manage," they say simply. And you will. You always do. You sit together for a while in silence. Then, just to lighten the mood, you joke, "Maybe the king will tax the moon next." Your spouse laughs, shaking their head. "Then we'll just hide it in a barrel." That's how humor works. Here it's a survival tool, a way to soften the edges of endless toil. Even the darkest jokes carry warmth. As evening approaches, you hear the distant strains of a fiddle. The tavern again. The day may belong to labor, but the night belongs to laughter and ale. You decide to go, just for a while. The tavern is smoky and loud, packed with villagers and travelers. The air hums with stories. A merchant boasts of foreign cities where streets are paved with stone and lamps burn all night. No one believes him, but everyone listens anyway. There's comfort in imagining a world wider than this one. You drink a little, just enough to feel the warmth spread through your chest. The ale is rough, bitter, but it dulls the ache in your back. Someone starts a song, off-key but heartfelt, and you join in without knowing all the words. You sing about kings and fools, love and betrayal, crops and curses. The lyrics change every time, but that doesn't matter. And somewhere in that smoky room, between the laughter and the noise, you feel something like freedom. Brief, fragile, but real. You realize that even when life is built on obligations and hierarchies, there's still a space that belongs to youth, the moments no one can own. You head home late, the stars spinning lazily above. The village sleeps, but a few windows still glow faintly. You walk slowly, savoring the cool air. The night smells of damp grass and ash, and the world feels soft again. Back inside, your spouse is asleep, their face peaceful in the dim light. You sit beside the fire and watch the embers fade. For a moment, you imagine the future, what it might be like if your children could live differently, without lords or taxes, free to breathe without permission. Then you shake your head. That's a dream for another time. You lie down, pull the blanket close, and listen to the house settle around you. The crackle of cooling wood, the whisper of wind through the roof. The faint murmur of your own heartbeat It all blends together into something oddly soothing. And before you drift off, one last thought crosses your mind. You may not control much in this world, but you've learned how to endure it. And sometimes, endurance is its own quiet rebellion. You wake again before dawn, though you're not sure you ever fully slept. The rooster has been screaming since the stars were still out, and the first hint of blue is spreading through the sky. Your bones ache in that familiar, stubborn way, but there's no time to linger. You roll off the straw mattress, pull on your tunic, and step out into the chill morning air. Your breath fogs. The world feels half asleep, wrapped in mist. Today, the manor steward has called for repairs on the road leading to the mill. That means your free hours what little you have belonged to him. You're used to this kind of community work. The church calls it duty. The steward calls it service. You call it what it isn't, paid labor, with a smile. Still, you shoulder your shovel and join the others trudging toward the path that winds along the stream. The water is high from last night's rain, and the smell of wet earth fills your lungs. You pass the same faces you see every Diamos with his crooked grin. Greta carrying her baby on her back, old Oswin muttering about how roads never stay fixed because stones have a mind to wander. Someone laughs, and for a moment the drudgery feels lighter. You reach the mill after sunrise. Its great wooden wheel churns in the water, sending up sprays of foam. The miller, a broad man with flour dusted into his hair, greets you with the same half-serious nod he gives everyone. He's richer than most peasants, but not quite noble, living in that strange middle space where respect and resentment mingle. He keeps his accounts close to the chest. No one ever really knows how much grain he skims for himself. Historians still argue whether millers were crooks or just survivors, but you're convinced it's a bit of both. You've seen how they live solid roofs, real furniture, wives in linen instead of wool. You'd probably skim a little too if you had the chance. You spend the morning clearing mud, resetting stones, and hauling branches away from the path. It's grueling, mindless work, but you've learned to let your mind wander while your body moves. You think about your children, your neighbors, even the rumors about the castle nearby, the one said to be haunted by a knight who never came home from the Crusades. That's the strange thing about medieval life. When no one's watching, your imagination becomes your entertainment. There are no books for you, no plays, no paintings to gaze at. Just stories whispered over ale or around fires. Everyone knows them, and everyone adds their own twist. By noon, the steward calls for a break. You sit on a boulder, wiping sweat from your brow. Someone passes a hunk of bread. Someone else, a skin of ale. The conversation drifts easily, complaints about taxes, jokes about the Lord's hounds, and the occasional absurd rumor. "Did you hear," says Tomas, lowering his voice dramatically, "that the monks at St. Godric's found a saint's finger bone that glows in the dark?" Greta laughs. "I probably dipped it in goose fat first." You smirk. "Maybe it's a sign from heaven, or just a sign they need better candles." Everyone chuckles. Humor, you realize, is the only luxury no one can tax. When the break ends, the steward reappears. He rides a small horse, looking down at everyone as if that's part of his job. His tunic bears the Lord's crest, and his expression says he knows exactly how much power that gives him. You nod politely as he inspects your work. He grunts once, a sound that could mean approval or mild indigestion, and rides on. You've done enough to avoid trouble, which is all that really matters. As the day wears on, your hands blister, your back screams. And yet there's a strange satisfaction in watching the road take shape. Each rock you place feels like proof that your labor, however invisible, leaves a trace on the world. Still, you can't help noticing how the steward praises the work to the miller, not the workers. The credit always climbs uphill. By late afternoon, the sky turns gold. You're dismissed with a curt nod, and everyone trudges homeward, tools clattering on shoulders. The path winds past the churchyard, where mossy gravestones lean like old men listening to gossip. You pause there for a moment, letting your gaze wander across the names, some worn away completely, some fresh. It's humbling to think that centuries from now, no one will remember your name either. But maybe that's okay. Maybe being forgotten is just the natural rhythm of things. On the way home, you pass the manor. Its stone walls rise cold and proud above the village. Through the gate, you glimpse servants carrying trays, dogs lounging near the door, and a faint echo of laughter. The Lord's family lives a world apart, yet their whims ripple through your life like distant thunder. You've seen him only once during tax collection and once during a feast. He looked polished, perfumed, untouched by mud or hunger. You remember thinking he smelled like roses and arrogance? Historians still argue whether medieval lords were tyrants or benevolent guardians. You suspect it depends on whether you're the one paying them rent or eating at their table. Back in your cottage, your spouse has already started dinner, a stew of beans, leeks, and a little salted pork. The smell fills the air, and your stomach growls. You sit down heavily, stretching your sore legs. The children chatter about the day, how they chased a frog, how the neighbor's cat stole a fish, how they saw a shooting star last night. You smile, half listening. Their joy feels like a secret luxury. You eat slowly, savoring each bite. The stew is thin, but it's hot and filling. Afterward, you help mend a broken stool, then step outside to fetch water. The sky has deepened into twilight, the horizon painted in orange and violet. The first stars appear, shy and flickering. You hear distant singing again. The tavern. You could go, but tonight you stay. Your body demands stillness. So you sit by the doorway, watching the world shift from work to rest. A breeze stirs the wheat in the nearby fields, and for a moment, everything feels soft, almost tender. You think about how much of life happens unseen, how the moments that define you are often the ones no one will ever record. There's no scribe writing about the way you watch the sunset or how you save the last crust of bread for your child. But those are the true stories, the ones that keep history alive beneath the surface. The church bell rings for evening prayer. You bow your head briefly out of habit, not conviction. Faith is a complicated thing. Here it's as much about fear as it is about belief. Still, when the sound fades, you whisper a small thanks to whoever might be listening, just in case. Inside, your spouse is singing softly as they fold cloth. You join in quietly, humming the tune you've known since childhood. It's a lullaby about sailors and stars, one that promises safe return, though most never do. You think of all the people who vanished from your life, neighbors taken by fever, a friend lost to war, a cousin who simply disappeared one winter and was never found. You wonder if the world keeps some hidden ledger where all those names are written. Later, after the children fall asleep, you sit by the fire again. You watch the flames dance, imagining faces in them. You think of Marta's stories, how she says fire remembers everything it touches. Maybe that's true. Maybe the flames have seen more history than any king or monk ever will. Outside, the wind shifts, carrying the faint smell of rain. You listen to it move through the thatch, gentle and rhythmic. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl calls a long, haunting note that echoes across the fields. You shiver, though not from cold. The world feels bigger at night, full of secrets just beyond sight. You lean back, closing your eyes. The crackle of the fire, the steady breath of your sleeping family. The distant hum of insects, it all weaves together into something ancient, something grounding. You realize that though life is hard, it's also whole. Every ache, every laugh, every secret teach one is part of a pattern older than any book. And tomorrow, the pattern will begin again. You'll wake before dawn, light the fire, fetch water, and start over. The wheel keeps turning, and so do you. Before you drift into sleep, one final thought slips through your mind. People will one day look back at this time and wonder how anyone endured it. But you'd tell them it's not endurance that keeps you alive. It's the small moments when no one's watching, when the world feels briefly yours. The rain comes before dawn, soft, steady drumming that seeps through the thatch and whispers against the shutters. You wake to its sound, a gray light creeping over the room. The air smells of damp straw and smoke. The fire has gone out again, and the chill nips at your fingers as you fumble to relight it. Outside, the village feels muffled, like someone has wrapped the world in wool. Days like this, blurred together. The fields are too wet to work, the roads too slick to travel, and everyone retreats indoors to patch clothes, repair tools, or just wait. You sit by the fire, mending a torn sleeve, listening to the rain tap its patient rhythm on the roof. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crows anyway, defiant in the drizzle. You shake your head, amused. Even the animals don't know when to rest. Your spouse hums softly as they grind grain for porridge, the sound almost hypnotic. It's strange these quiet, uneventful mornings sometimes feel more real than all the busy days put together. When you're not rushing, you start to notice things. The way smoke curls up like a lazy ghost. The sound of a child's breath as they sleep. The faint perfume of rosemary drying above the hearth. Rain means more than inconvenience, it's life itself. Without it, crops fail. With too much, they rot. You remember the flood 5 years ago, when the river burst its banks? The fields turned to swamps, and the grain spoiled before harvest. People went hungry that winter, and the smell of mildew clung to everything. You learned then how fragile stability really is. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants lived in constant fear of famine, but you know that fear never truly leaves. It just hides under your daily routines like a shadow. By mid-morning, the rain softens, though it doesn't stop. You pull on your cloak and step outside anyway. The ground squelches beneath your boots, and puddles reflect the gray sky like dull mirrors. Across the path, Marta's hut smokes faintly, her herbs likely steaming in the damp air. You wave and she nods, her face barely visible through the mist. Even she doesn't look so mystical when her firewood's wet. You walk toward the well to fetch water, though you could probably just hold out a bucket and wait. The village is quiet, its usual rhythm muted. A few people sweep mud from their thresholds or chase chickens that escaped their coops. The smell of wet wool and wood smoke hangs thickly in the air. On the way back, you pass the church. The door is ajar, and candlelight glows faintly within. Father Benedict is inside, as always, murmuring his prayers. You hesitate, then step in, partly to escape the chill. The church smells of wax and old wood. It's small but sturdy, the only stone building in the village besides the manor. You sit on a bench near the back, shaking off your cloak. The priest glances up but doesn't scold you for dripping on the floor. Instead, he finishes his prayer, then says softly, "Wet day for the soul, as well as the body." You nod, unsure if he expects a response. He moves closer, his robe whispering against the floor. "I heard the steward might visit soon," he says quietly. "Best make sure your tide's ready." You sigh. Of course, rain or shine, the churches do never waits. "We'll manage," you answer. "I'm sure you will," he replies, though his eyes say he doubts it. You leave a few moments later, stepping back into the rain. You don't dislike Father Benedict, he's kinder than most, but sometimes his words feel like weights disguised as blessings. Back home, your children have woken. The oldest helps stir the porridge while the younger ones chase each other around the table, giggling. You smile despite yourself. Childhood here is brief but bright like candlelight in a drafty room. They don't yet understand the weight of things, and maybe that's mercy. After breakfast, you decide to repair the roof. Water drips steadily from one corner, forming a dark patch on the floor. Climbing onto the thatch isn't fun in the rain, but it's better than sleeping under a leak. You grab a bundle of reeds and a wooden mallet and make your way up, balancing carefully on the slick beams. From up here, the village looks different, tiny and quiet, almost peaceful. You can see the smoke rising from chimneys, the ribbon of the road leading toward the forest, and the faraway gleam of the river. As you work, you think about how everything here depends on cooperation. When your neighbor's roof leaks, you help patch it. When your own food runs out, someone lends grain. It's not charity, it's survival. Everyone knows they'll need help eventually. You remember last winter when old Oswin fell sick. Half the village took turns bringing him broth and firewood. When he died, everyone gathered to dig his grave, even the ones who'd argued with him about goats or fences. That's how life works here. Small kindnesses in exchange for the comfort of belonging. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers were insular or deeply communal. You'd tell them both are true. People mind each other's business constantly, but they also hold each other up when it matters. Privacy is a luxury, but loneliness is rare. By midday, the rain has thinned to mist. You finish the roof, soaked but satisfied, and climb down. Inside, your spouse hands you a mug of weak ale. It's barely enough to warm your throat, but you smile anyway. You sit by the fire, steam rising from your clothes, and listen to the quiet hum of life returning. Then, from outside, a shout breaks the calm. You rush to the door. A rider is approaching, mud-splattered, breathless. It's one of the Lord's messengers. He dismounts quickly, calling for everyone to gather in the square. You exchange uneasy glances with your neighbors and follow. The messenger unrolls a parchment and reads aloud, "A new levy for the king's army. Every household must send one able-bodied man or pay a substitute's fee." You feel the air shift around you, heavy and still. War again. Somewhere far away, men with crowns have decided to move borders, and now your quiet village must bleed for it. You glance at Tomas beside you. His jaw tightens, but he says nothing. Greta clutches her baby closer. The messenger finishes his speech, tucks the parchment away, and rides off without waiting for questions. The crowd disperses slowly, murmuring, "Ah." You walk home, your mind buzzing. You've seen what war does: families broken, fields abandoned, widows forced to beg. You remember your cousin's face when he came back from fighting in France, haunted and hollow-eyed. He barely spoke after that. That night, the village feels heavier. The tavern is quiet. Even the dogs seem subdued. You sit by the fire, staring into the flames, wondering if your name will be drawn. Your spouse says softly, "Maybe it won't come to that." You nod, but neither of you believes it. Later, when the children are asleep, you whisper, "If I have to go, take the goat to Marta. She'll keep it safe." Your spouse gives you a look that says, "Don't talk like that," but you both know it's wise to plan for the worst. You lie awake long after the fire dies down, listening to the rain's last drops slide down the roof. Outside, the world feels vast and indifferent. You wonder how many people across the kingdom are hearing the same decree tonight, feeling the same fear. Eventually, exhaustion wins. You drift into a dream where you're walking along the river, but the water runs red with silt. You try to call out, but no sound comes. Then the dream fades into gray. When you wake, the rain has stopped. The air feels clean, washed. You step outside, stretching, watching sunlight pierce through the clouds. The village glistens like it's been reborn. Birds sing from the hedges, and smoke curls gently from every chimney. For a moment, you let yourself believe in peace again. The world looks fragile, but whole. You stand there, breathing it in, knowing that even if tomorrow brings trouble, this morning belongs entirely to you. The morning sun glances across the damp village, turning the puddles into patches of light. The smell of wet earth and wood smoke lingers, thick and comforting as you start the day. Life goes on, because it must. You stretch your sore shoulders, feeling the echo of yesterday's work in your arms, and step outside to face another round of chores. The messenger's words from last night still haunt you. War again. It hangs over everything, silent but heavy. You catch people whispering near the well, trading rumors as if words might somehow change the outcome. Who will go? When will they take them? What will be left behind? Nobody knows. And that uncertainty tastes bitter on your tongue. Still, there are mouths to feed and tools to mend. You grab your hoe and head toward the garden plot behind the house. The soil is dark and rich now after the rain, easy to turn. You work in silence, letting the rhythm calm you lift, twist, push, step. The familiar ache in your back is oddly reassuring. At least this pain you can control. You glance up and see Tomas a few plots away, his shirt clinging to his back, his movements sharp and focused. He meets your eyes briefly, then nods. That's all the conversation you need. Here, silence carries entire sentences. By mid-morning, the sky clears completely. The sun burns away the mist, and the air fills with the hum of flies and the distant lowing of cattle. Children chase each other between huts, their laughter cutting through the worry that clings to the adults. For a little while, you let that sound remind you what normal feels like. Then Marta approaches, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She looks more serious than usual, her basket swinging lightly from her arm. "They're saying the steward's men will be here by week's end," she murmurs, glancing around before speaking. Counting heads, collecting names. You frown. So soon. She nods. Word is, the Lord owes a levy to the king. 10 men from our parish at least, or the silver equivalent. You let out a low breath. 10, that's not just numbers, that's fathers, sons, brothers. You glance toward the church steeple, barely visible beyond the trees, and feel a wave of bitterness rise. The world may spin on faith and fealty, but it's always the small folk who pay the price. Marta must see the look in your eyes because she lowers her voice even more. "There's talk," she says carefully, "of some men hiding in the woods until it passes. Near the old mill, beyond the marsh." You shake your head. If they're caught, they'll hang. She shrugs, the faintest smile on her lips. Better hanging than bleeding in France. Then she walks away, her basket bumping softly against her hip. You stand there a long moment, the hoe dangling loosely from your hand. The idea is madness and, yet, not entirely unthinkable. Historians still argue whether desertion or flight was common among peasants conscripted for war. The records, are written by those who stayed behind or those who caught the runners. But for every name carved into parchment, there must have been another that simply vanished into the trees, into silence. That night, you tell your spouse what Marta said. They don't speak for a long time. Finally, they ask quietly, "Would you go?" You stare into the fire. "If I thought it would save us," the flames pop and hiss. You can hear the rain again. No, not rain this time, but the wind, restless against the shutters. Your spouse nods slowly. "Then we'll prepare, just in case." The next days pass like slow water through a sieve. Each morning feels heavier than the one before. You notice small changes around the village, the smith repairing blades more than plowshares, the priest praying longer than usual, the women hoarding salt and flour. Life continues, but beneath it all hums a tension, like a taut string waiting to snap. At night, you lie awake, listening to the sounds of your home, the crackle of dying embers, the steady breath of your children, the creak of the rafters in the wind. You think of the forest Marta mentioned, the dense thickets, the hidden hollows where a person might disappear. You can almost smell the damp moss, feel the mud sucking at your boots. The thought feels both terrifying and strangely freeing. By the 5th day, riders arrive. The steward's mengrim, efficient and dressed in dark green cloaks, ride into the village with scrolls and a wax seal bearing the Lord's crest. The sound of their hooves on wet ground draws everyone to their doors. You step outside, your stomach tight. They dismount in front of the tavern, where Father Benedict waits, his hands clasped. He looks pale. One of the riders unrolls the parchment and begins reading names. Each time a name is called, the crowd murmurs, heads turning. When they reach yours, your spouse grips your arm so hard it hurts. You step forward slowly, trying not to let your fear show. The steward's man marks your name, nods curtly, and moves on. That's its sure fate, sealed with a stroke of ink. Back home, the silence feels unbearable. You sit at the table staring at your hands, still dirt-stained from the fields. Your spouse finally breaks the quiet. We can't let them take you. You look up, startled. And do what? Run? Yes. They whisper fiercely. If they want to take you to die for some lord's quarrel, let them chase your shadow instead. You say nothing, but your mind is already running through the possibilities. Through the forest, places to hide, faces you might trust. You think of Marta again, her calm defiance. That night, after everyone's asleep, you pack a small bundle. A crust of bread, a knife, a flask of ale, a few coins. You kiss your sleeping children's foreheads and whisper a prayer that they won't remember this part of youth, the part that runs. Then you slip out into the night. The moon hangs low, a thin silver curve. The village lies still behind you, its fires dim. You move quietly, every step measured, every sound amplified. The forest looms ahead, black and endless. You pause at its edge, heart pounding. The world changes immediately. The air grows colder, denser. The sound of your breath feels too loud. Branches snag at your cloak, roots twist beneath your feet. But the forest feels alive, watchful, but not cruel. You find a fallen log and sit for a moment, catching your breath. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls. You think of how many have taken this same path before: runaways, poachers, outlaws. The woods have always been a refuge for the desperate. Some say ghosts wander here, the restless spirits of those who fled too far and never came back. You don't doubt it. The trees feel older than any church, older than any crown. You walk for hours, guided by starlight and instinct. Finally, you spot the faint outline of a structure, a crumbling mill, just as Marta described. You approach carefully, your knife ready. Inside, the air smells of mold and damp straw. Then a voice whispers, "You're not the first." You freeze. From the shadows, a man steps forward, lantern in hand. His face is thin, eyes hollow but alert. Behind him, you see others 3, maybe 4 huddled near the remains of a fire. They look like farmers, like you, worn but unbroken. "We're not soldiers," the man says quietly. "Just men who'd rather live like foxes than die like dogs." You nod slowly. "Then I suppose I'm one of you." They share their bread, their silence. You lie on the cold ground, staring at the rafters, feeling something strange, a mixture of fear and relief. Out here, no lord's law can reach you. But the price of that freedom is everything you've known. In the days that follow, you learn how to live quietly. You move camp often, take only what you need. Sometimes, villagers leave food near the old path, wrapped in cloth, small acts of rebellion no one will ever speak of. You're a ghost now, part of the forest's breath. Historians still argue whether outlaw bands like this were a real resistance or just scattered survivors. People run because they're afraid, but also because they dream of a world that doesn't punish them for being small. One evening, as you watch the sun dip behind the trees, you feel a moment of peace, so sharp it almost hurts. The world hums softly around you, the rustle of leaves, the ripple of a stream, the distant song of birds settling for the night. For the first time in weeks, you breathe without fear. Maybe tomorrow you'll be caught, maybe not. Dawn breaks in streaks of amber and rose, filtering through the branches above your head. You wake to the sound of the forest, a slow drip of dew, a blackbird's early trill, the rustle of unseen creatures. The air is cold, but clean, the kind of cold that makes you feel sharpened, alive. You sit up, rubbing your arms, and watch the mist lifting off the moss. Around you, the others stir, stretching stiff limbs, murmuring quiet greetings. There's no talk of plans, not yet. Every morning starts with the same unspoken question: how long before the world remembers you exist? You step outside the ruin of the old mill, where the stream glides past like a ribbon of glass. You crouch by the bank and cup your hands in the icy water, drinking deeply. The taste is pure, wild, nothing like the metallic tang of the village well. When you look up, the sunlight has found the treetops, turning them gold. For a moment, you almost forget why you're here. Breakfast is whatever's left: a few crumbs of bread, a piece of dried fish, a handful of berries gathered by one of the others. There's no complaint. Hunger is a language you all understand by now, quiet but constant. A few of the men talk in low voices, planning to sneak back toward the village that night. They need news who's been taken, whether soldiers have come searching. You listen without joining in. The thought of returning, even for a moment, knots your stomach. The world you knew feels distant, like a dream fading after waking. When the others leave, you stay by the water, tracing patterns in the mud with a stick. You think of your spouse, of your children. Are they safe? Do they curse your name for leaving, or whisper prayers for your return? You'll never know, not yet. The ache of not knowing sits heavier than hunger. By midday, you and two others head deeper into the woods to forage. The forest floor is soft, spongy with moss, littered with the debris of old seasons. You find mushrooms, a few roots, and, miraculously, a wild apple tree with fruit still clinging to its branches. You climb up, carefully balancing on the damp bark, and twist off what you can reach. The apples are small, sour, but they smell like sunlight. You hear laughter below. The men joke that you were a squirrel in another life. You toss them an apple, grinning despite yourself. For a brief instant, you're just people again, not fugitives, not peasants, just human beings in the company of trees. But peace never lasts long here. The sound comes faint, at first a rhythmic thud, unnatural, like boots on wet ground. You freeze. The others do too. The laughter dies instantly. Through the trees, you glimpse movement, shadows, and flashes of metal. Soldiers. Panic floods your chest. You drop the apple and gesture sharply, motioning the others to scatter. You dart left, into the undergrowth, heart hammering. Branches slap your face. Brambles tear your sleeves. You hear shouting now, closer, the crash of pursuit. You run until your lungs burn, until your legs threaten to give out. Finally, you dive behind a fallen oak, pressing yourself into the hollow beneath its trunk. The smell of damp rot fills your nose. You lie there, utterly still, barely breathing. Time stretches. The voices fade, replaced by the steady thrum of your pulse in your ears. Then silence. You wait longer, afraid to trust it. Finally, you crawl out, trembling, every sound magnified. The forest looks unchanged, but you know it's not the same. A line has been crossed between safety and danger, between hiding and being hunted. When you find your companions again, hours later, one is missing. The younger one peers. You think his name was never returned. No one says it aloud, but everyone knows what that means. That night, the campfire burns low, and no one speaks. The forest seems to mourn with you, whispering through the leaves. Historians still argue whether deserters and outlaws faced systematic pursuit or were mostly ignored by lords who had bigger worries. You tell them this: even if no one comes, the fear itself hunts you. It walks beside you in every rustle of branches, every broken twig, every dream that ends in the sound of galloping hooves. Days pass. You grow thinner, harder, quieter. The forest becomes part of you, the rhythm of its nights, the taste of its water, the scent of pine and decay. You learn to read its signs, the tracks of deer, the shift of birds that warns of intruders. Life here is stripped to its core: food, shelter, silence. But the mind, stubborn thing that it is, keeps wandering back. You picture your spouse kneading dough at the table, the children chasing chickens through the mud. You remember the feel of the hearth's warmth, the rough wood of the door under your hand. You'd give anything to touch that world again, even just for a day. One evening, you find yourself walking toward the edge of the forest almost without deciding to. You tell the others you need to check the snares, but really, you just need to see the fields again to remind yourself they still exist. The path feels both familiar and strange, overgrown but somehow knowing your steps. When the trees finally thin, you catch sight of the open land beyond, the patchwork of fields, the faint line of smoke curling from chimneys. Your chest tightens. It's home, but not. You stay hidden, watching. The fields are quieter than you remember. No laughter, no song. You see figures bent over the soil, working silently. Soldiers linger near the well, their armor dull in the late sun. Then you see them, your family. Your spouse at the door, your children playing near the fence. They look thinner, tired, but alive. You want to run to them, to shout their names, but you can't. To be seen is to die. So you stay in the shadows, watching the life that used to be yours unfold without you. When your youngest looks toward the trees, you swear for a heartbeat they see you. You press your hand to your mouth to keep from crying out. You stay until dusk, until the chill creeps in and the light bleeds from the sky. Then you turn back toward the forest. Each step feels heavier than the last. You tell yourself it's enough just to have seen them, but the ache says otherwise. That night, you dream of home again. But this time, it's not the village, it's the forest itself transformed. The trees are carved with faces, watching you with calm eyes. The stream sings in a voice you almost understand. You wake before dawn, the dream lingering like mist. As the sun rises, the leader of your little band, Diedrich, a wiry man with sharp eyes, tells you he's leaving. Too many patrols, he says. Too many ghosts. I'm heading north, maybe to the coast. Heard there's work on the ships. The others murmur uncertain farewells. You clasp his hand briefly. May you find a place where they don't ask for names. He smiles faintly. If such a place exists. After he leaves, the forest feels emptier. The silence stretches wider, as if even the trees are waiting for something. You start to wonder how long you can keep living like this, half alive, half erased. By late summer, the war has burned through its first fury. Rumors drift in. Victories, losses, treaties. None of it seems real. But one night, Marta herself appears at the edge of camp, cloak soaked with dew. She looks older, wearier, but her eyes are the same sharp and kind. I knew I'd find you here, she whispers. They're calling it over now. The levees ended. You could return, if you dare. The words hang in the air like smoke. Return, you don't move at first. The thought terrifies you as much as it comforts you. To go back means explaining, facing judgment, maybe worse. But to stay means fading into nothing. You spend the night turning it over, lying awake beneath the stars. The forest seems to breathe with you, patient, timeless. Finally, as the first light seeps through the leaves, you make your choice. When you step out of the woods, the path feels unfamiliar under your feet. The village waits ahead, small and gray against the dawn. Smoke rises gently from a few chimneys. A dog barks once, distant. You walk slowly, each step like testing a memory. People see you before you reach the square. Some gasp, others cross themselves. You nod to them, unsure what to say. Then, from your doorway, your spouse appears still, silent. For a heartbeat, neither of you moves. Then they run to you, and the world snaps back into color. The embrace is wordless, trembling. The smell of bread, of earth, of home fills your nose. You've returned to the same place, but nothing is quite the same. And yet, somehow, it's enough. Historians still argue whether deserters who returned were punished or quietly forgiven. You'd tell them. Forgiveness wasn't written on parchment. It was found in a glance, a meal shared, a life resumed without questions. That night, as you sit by the fire again for the first time in months, you stare into the flames and listen to the familiar creak of your roof. The world outside might still rage and shift, but here, in this small circle of warmth, the rhythm of survival continues steady, stubborn, human. The morning comes quietly, gold lights spilling over rooftops, birds skimming across the sky. You wake slowly, still sore from months of tension, travel, and hiding. Your body remembers the forest, the cold, the mud, the fear, but here, at home, it softens into something familiar. You stretch and take a deep breath, tasting the crispness of air untainted by smoke or sweat. The village is waking around you. Rooster calls, doors opening with creaks, the smell of bread baking from early risers. Life hums, gently, insistently, beneath your feet. You take a moment to just watch. Children chase each other through puddles, squealing with laughter. You note the familiar curve of the thatched roofs, the way sunlight hits the stone path in front of your cottage, and even the moss growing along the fence posts. These small details, once unnoticed, feel like treasures. You can touch them, smell them, even step on them. This is freedom, quiet but profound, and you almost laugh at how long you feared it wouldn't exist again. Breakfast is a simple affair. Porridge thickened with dried berries, weak ale, and stale bread warmed over the fire. Your spouse and children sit across from you, chatter filling the space like sunlight through a window. No one speaks of the levee, the forest, the months of hiding. That silence is a gift, an unspoken acknowledgement that you've survived, and survival is enough. The day drifts on slowly. You move through chores with a newfound patience, tending to animals, repairing tools, and sweeping mud from the floorboards. Each action, ordinary in its rhythm, carries a weight of relief. Even mundane tasks feel celebratory, a testament to endurance and return. The miller passes by your gate and nods, offering a small smile as simple acknowledgement of shared labor and the invisible bonds of community. You nod back, your eyes crinkling slightly. These gestures, tiny as they are, have never felt more significant. In the afternoon, you wander down toward the fields. The earth is soft beneath your boots, the crops flourishing under sun and rain alike. The village's life moves in patterns unchanged by your absence. A neighbor plows. A child chases a stray goat. An old woman tends her herbs. Watching them, you notice the continuity of life, how the world goes on even when fear threatens to steal it from you. You remember the nights in the forest, how the world had seemed endless, dangerous, and yet achingly alive. Here, it is gentler, but just as real. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were passive in the face of authority or quietly resistant. You'd tell them it is both. In moments unseen, in whispered strategies and secret paths, in leaving bread for those fleeing or sharing news in hushed tones, people live resistance without ever being recorded. The true stories of survival are written not in official ledgers, but in the small, defiant acts that no one remembers but everyone feels. By evening, you gather firewood with your children. They chatter endlessly, pointing out birds, bugs, and clouds that look like dragons. You laugh more easily than you have in months. The warmth of the fire, the closeness of your family, and the soft glow of dusk form a cocoon around you. The world outside the village, its taxes, its lords, its wars feels distant, though you know it will return. But for now, the present is a soft golden sphere you can hold in your hands. After supper, you sit on the doorstep, watching the sun dip behind distant hills. The shadows stretch long and lazy across the fields. You think of Marta, of Edric, of the others who risked everything to escape what they could not endure. You hope they define moments like this, where the world is soft, where breath can deepen without fear. Night comes, and the village settles into quiet. Crickets hum, Wind stirs the leaves, and stars puncture the sky with their cold, unwavering light. You sit by the fire, leaning back, feeling the weight of months ease from your shoulders. Your children sleep nearby, their chests rising and falling steadily. Your spouse tidies the last dishes, the firelight dancing across their face. Everything is simple. Everything is enough. Your thoughts drift to the forest you once called home, the wild paths, the cold streams, the endless shadows. You realize now that those months of fear, hunger, and uncertainty gave you a new lens to see life, to appreciate moments that once passed unnoticed. Every smile, every shared meal, every warm corner of your cottage carries a depth that only absence and danger can teach. Historians still argue whether these fugitive experiences were transformative or merely survival strategies. You know the answer. Both. The memory of living unseen, moving like a shadow, makes the small joys of ordinary life feel profound, almost sacred. It teaches vigilance, humility, and the intimate value of everyday miracles. You can never forget what it was like to exist on the edge, and that memory makes this return more vibrant, more precious. Later, the wind shifts outside, bringing a whisper through the trees. You close your eyes, feeling the hum of the village, the rhythm of fire, the steady pulse of your children. The fear, the running, the hidden nights, all of it settles into a quiet echo. You exhale slowly, letting the weight of the past fall away, replaced by a gentleness you never thought you'd feel again. Finally, as the fire dies down to embers, you step inside. The room smells of wood smoke, bread, and the faint perfume of herbs drying in the rafters. You sit near the hearth, feeling the heat seep into your bones. You take a deep breath, letting the day's peace anchor you. Life will still bring challenges, still demand resilience. But tonight, the world is soft. You are safe. You are home. You are whole. And as your eyelids grow heavy, the last thoughts before sleep drift like smoke, that even in a time of fear, of lords and levies, of forests and fugitives, there is life worth living, moments worth savoring, and warmth worth returning to.